Is there a writing craft book on your bedside table? Has it been there for a while?
Do you keep meaning to get past chapter 2 or chapter 1 or just the first page?
Then the Words to Write By podcast is for you. Hi, I'm Renee. I teach composition and creative writing to college students. My background is in poetry, but I'm working on my memoir.
And I'm Kim. I'm trained as a science journalist, but now I'm trying my hand at short fiction. Each week we'll be tackling a chapter of some well-known, but perhaps not so well-read writing craft book.
Together, we'll uncover brilliant insights, face the hard truths, and totally disagree when the author is wrong.
This is our podcast, after all.
And then we're going to take what we learn and apply it to our own writing
by doing the book's suggested exercises.
We're inviting you to read along, or just tune in for the Cliff Notes version.
We're committed to improving our own craft, one writing advice book at a time, and we'd love for you to join us. Hello, and welcome to Words to Write By.
Hey, hey! Hope y'all been having a good time. Before we go into our discussion of Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird,
we're going to talk to you about our Patreon account.
Patreon is there, and we have one, and it's waiting for you. There will be bonus episodes of us workshopping each other's work, and you can get show notes, and you can get, what else can they get, Kim?
Oh, mostly those. I mean, we got a bunch of fun bonus podcasts because often we'll do an exercise associated with the episode, and we'll go through what one person's exercise is in the podcast, and then we move the other one over to Patreon, so you get a chance to hear how we both did for the exercise.
Yep. And we also have a process group.
Yes, every other week through meetup.com, we organize a online process group where writers can come in, and we don't discuss our work specifically, but we talk about the other challenges of being a writer. You know, how to find someone that publishes your stuff, or how to tackle a particular difficulty that you're running into when you're writing. And it's a really useful discussion group. It's at Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you go to our website, wordstowritebypodcast.com, you'll see a nice little button that you can link right through there.
Yep. You can also get some show notes on the same website, wordstowritebypodcast.com.
And with that, we're going to start the episode with an interview. Last week, we talked about writing groups, getting writing feedback. And so Renee mentioned the classes that she takes, the workshop classes, and her instructor for those classes has agreed to be interviewed. So,
yay, Carrie!
My name is Carrie Muir, and I teach at the Writing Salon. I've taught their memoir, personal essay. Right now I'm doing a class where people are working kind of on a marathon as opposed to a sprint. So they're doing a book, sort of like a semester-long book launching project.
Let's say someone is a writer and they're struggling. What kind of problems would a writing workshop solve?
There are so many problems to choose from, so many problems to have. One is just sort of feeling lonely, just sort of feeling on their own. So a writing workshop can help people kind of plug into a community and feel like they have a deadline and someone to write for, someone to write towards. Like, okay, I have my workshop, on Saturday, and I have a few more days. I have to do it. I'm going to see my friend. I'm going to see the person I feel in a friendly way competitive with. Writers tend to work alone. It's just great to have a group. And then on a craft level, a good workshop can actually improve the mechanics of their writing. And I think most importantly, it can keep them inspired and just keep them wanting to write and excited about it. But that depends on the workshop, right? I mean, because certain workshops can can make you just feel like a big fat turd, and then you don't want to go to workshop, and you might not even want to write, and you might even second guess why you're doing this at all.
Have you had personal experience as a workshop participant where you felt like a turd?
Yeah, of course. I think everybody has. You have days where you go into workshop and you come out going, oh my God, I just want to dig a big hole and crawl into it,
How, as a facilitator of the workshops, do you make the experience positive for your students?
Right. Well, I've had a big learning curve with this because I kind of got thrown into teaching workshop. And I'll be honest, at the beginning, I was just kind of going in the dark, kind of going by intuition, and I wasn't sure. And I made a lot of mistakes. I think my big realization is that a lot of writers already know what they're doing. They're just born writers, a lot of them. They're just storytellers. And all they really need is that little push that says, you're okay. You're doing great. You're absolutely doing great. And so I think a lot of it is just telling the writers that they know what they're doing and just to go with that voice. And if they want to make a different choice, great, based on the workshop feedback. I shifted my emphasis from, oh my God, people are paying for the workshop. That means I have to mold them. I have to train them. I have to Frankenstein them or something. No, they're already there. All you have to do is tell them it's okay to pop out. Even if they pop out in a way that later they go, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. So what? No one's going to hate them. Everything's fine. This is a workshop. This is writing. You don't have to form it. You don't have to hammer it. I just have to help them maybe get out of their own way or just peel back certain resistances or certain fears. But I had to learn those things as I've gone, and I have made mistakes.
So when a discussion of a piece goes off the rails, how do you sense when it's about to happen, and how do you get people back on track?
Right. I remember I was watching like the news one day. It was Don Lemon of all people. And Don Lemon was like, had his interviewee or his like couple of people that were talking, and somebody said something, and Don Lemon said, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to push back on that if that's all right. And he wasn't hostile or anything. And I was just like, oh, that's all you have to do. You have to like freak out. It doesn't have to be an emotional moment. You can just even ask them permission. You can say, I think I'm going to push back on that if that's all right. And then suddenly everyone's like, oh, yeah, it's all right. And usually when I'll do that is when I sense that something is being said that is going to, it's not really about the writing, although it could be, but it touches on something about the core of the writer, having to do with the writer's motivation or their personality or their political correctness. I mean, it could be 100 different things, but I know that it's kind of going to the core of that writer's essence. And then I'll just be like, I'm going to push back on that if that's okay with you guys. People go, oh, okay, it's being pushed back on. But there's sometimes just a momentum. It's kind of like a group think. It's almost like a mob mentality. I mean, on a very small scale. And I think the human psyche can suddenly tip into a mob mentality. It's just something we have, some primitive part of our brain. And when I sense that the mob mentality is taking over and people are just sort of becoming part of the group as opposed to really thinking for themselves, usually something not great is happening, for the writer at least.
You said that basically a writer's already there, but a lot of writers don't necessarily feel like they're already there. They feel like they're just still in the early stages. Like, how prepared should one be before one takes the step of joining a critique group or taking a workshop like this?
That's a great question. I think that a workshop is a little bit more, I don't want to say advanced because no one ever feels they're advanced, but I think it's a great idea to take a couple generative classes first, because there is a critical aspect of workshop, right? People may not say, I hate this or whatever, but they're saying, oh, this is how it affected me. A writer can take that and it can give them energy, but it can also kind of take them out of their own point of view. I think it's great to take a couple of generative workshops where you're making every mistake in the book. You're trying crazy things. You're just going, oh, how do I feel about my father? How I don't even know. Let me write about that. Let me just do a stream of consciousness. Let me write about myself in the third person. What happens then? I think it's great just to get your feet wet and just jump in and try everything, make every mistake in the book, experiment. And then when you feel like, oh, I have an essay and it's a rough draft and I would like now to see how people react to my baby. I would like that.
Thank you so much. This was fantastic. I am so glad that Renee has you as a workshop leader and that she was able to get you to come and talk with us.
Yeah. All right. Say hi to Renee for me.
Thanks, Carrie. You're awesome.
Okay, so we are doing 3 chapters today because we're getting to the end of the book and the content of each of these are going down, so we can cover more in one episode.
Yes, it is suffering from the diminishing returns of the craft book.
Or of any advice book, I believe.
Yeah, pretty much any advice book. I mean, we haven't read like any self-help books, but I'd imagine
It's like a news article. You front load everything in the front because you know people are going to drop off as they go along. And I think that you have to be pretty dedicated to get to the end of the book.
Yeah.
Which we are.
Although she does put in a very good chapter. So it seems like she front loaded a lot of the good stuff and then sprinkled in a couple more chapters throughout.
So the first chapter we're going to do is called Letters. This is still in the...
Part 3.
Yes, it's still in part 3, Help Along the Way.
So this is pretty much about when you're stuck, right? And you're not really sure what to do. She says one way you can kind of get unstuck is to tell a part of your story or your own history or a part of a character's history in the form of a letter. And the letters and formality just might free you from the tyranny of perfectionism.
For me, this felt kind of like a rehash of some of the earlier stuff that she talks about. The idea of free writing an idea until something kind of comes to the surface. And she had her whole bit about picture frame method of like not something that's too intimidating, just tackling like some aspect that appeals to you. Her whole asking around. In this chapter, she goes through some examples of letters that she's written and how they transformed into more substantial pieces. And she talks about how as she's writing the letter, she was asking around to various people. So that, and then finally the kind of what emerges, the whole Polaroid. Like you think you're right about one thing, but it turns out you're writing about something else.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of generative and it helps you figure out why you are doing the thing you're doing because you're writing about it. You're not necessarily trying to craft a very good essay to a reader. You're addressing it to a specific person to tell them about your story. Like it's the telling and the telling versus showing.
What do you think it's achieved when you're writing a letter to somebody versus just free writing it?
I would call this more of like a focused free write.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think through things. It's less similar to free writing and it's more similar to her plot treatment.
Okay.
To me, anyway.
Right, because for her plot treatment, she was phrasing it as how she would discuss to her editor why these things were important.
Right. It makes you make choices, but those choices, it's not intimidating because those choices aren't made with the stakes of publication or a agent or whatever reading on the other end. It's just a friend.
Or even a critique group.
It's just a friend and it helps you get the words out.
I think you've got a good point. If you're writing it to somebody, that changes the focus.
Here's one of her letters. She said that a magazine editor asked her to write some essay about her being a fan of the Giants.
Which is a baseball team. I was thinking at first it was a football team, but I was confused. It's a baseball team.
It's a sports ball team. That's how much me and Kim know about sports ball. So here her example is, Dear Sam, I wrote at the top of the page, I want to tell you about how I loved the San Francisco Giants when I was a little kid. Instead of imagining the editor peering skeptically over my shoulder as I wrote, I pictured Sam sitting down to read this one day, how glad he might be that I had gotten it down. I started telling him my memories of the strangely reddish dirt of the base paths, the gunfire, of batting practice, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. So think of it as the telling and telling versus showing. You're telling someone about your story, but maybe with lots of detail. You're not having to tell a story now, right? You're not having to worry about like structure and all that stuff.
Yeah, not an inciting incident or introducing somebody properly or any of the stuff that you're not telling your readers because you're holding it out for later on. I could see that.
I think that would be helpful. I mean, that's a nice tactic. If you're a perfectionist like me, I can see that totally cutting through perfectionism.
So I think this is going to be our writing exercise for this week.
The letter?
Yeah. You've convinced me. I think this is something worth trying.
Okay.
Nice. And then on to a chapter you really liked called Writer's Block.
So this chapter was as good as like the first 4 chapters.
Okay.
I feel like this one could have been front-loaded, but they put it back here so that the rest of the book had a little more substance.
We all know what writer's block is, but I thought actually that she had a take on it that was slightly different than how I'd seen it before. What would you say the standard definition of a writer's block is?
To me, a writer's block, I literally think of a wall. Mm-hmm. Like there is a wall and there are ideas on the other side of it, and I cannot gain access through the wall. I can't get over the wall. I can't get around the wall. I can't get to what I know is on the other side. Mm-hmm. What about you? What do you think about writer's block?
Writer's block usually hits me where I just can't get the words out. Like I write a sentence and it just doesn't work. And when I'm writing, I write one sentence and it kind of powers the next sentence along. And so if I get to a spot where like I can't come up with what the first sentence is, it just doesn't happen. And it's not necessarily always fiction. Like sometimes I'm just in a mood where I can't put the words together. Like the other day when took a long time to get the episode posted because I just couldn't put together the summary. And I tried it, and I went away and came back, and it came out fine. But, like, there was a block. I just could not write words on page.
That's frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do?
I went away, did something else.
Did it work?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't a high-pressure thing, so it wasn't as bad. Because there's the other idea of the writer's block where, like, a person is devoid of, like, ideas.
Mm-hmm.
What I liked about this chapter is not just that you can't get the ideas out, but you're worried that you'll never be able to get the ideas out ever again.
Yeah.
I had one idea, I wrote the book, and now I have no ideas left. That was all I was good for.
She says it's the fear that you'll never write again is going to hit you when you feel not only lost and unable to find a few little breadcrumbs that would identify the path you were on, but also when you're at your lowest ebb of energy and faith.
I'd always considered the intellectual part, the can't get the words out on a page, can't get the ideas out, but I never considered the anxiety, fear, paralyzed element that you get when your emotions just clamp you up and you can't write it all and you just feel awful too. So it goes back and forth. Like you can't write, so you feel awful, and you feel awful, so you can't write.
Yeah.
Death spiral.
Yeah. And no wonder artists are a little crazy.
Yeah.
Right? There's something about the tortured artist. And I think perhaps this might be feeding into that, or like part of what they're feeding on.
And it's never been quite that bad for me because I've always been able to imagine things. I just can't necessarily imagine the things I'm supposed to be working on. And I've always known that if I give it enough time, my brain will kick in and we'll be able to write sentences again, because it has in the past. It's not something I'm worried about losing the ability for. It's just kind of a way to coax it out.
Mm-hmm.
How about you? Do you get a kind of a emotional angst when you can't write?
Yeah, I get the whole, why am I even doing this? This is stupid. I'm not very good at this, or I'll never get it, or I'll never figure it out, or, I say mean things to myself. If you've been listening to the podcast, you know I'm not very nice to myself. That all comes out. Mm-hmm. What I think is interesting is Lamott's definition of writer's block, or at least the way she sees it. She says the word block suggests that you are constipated or stuck, when the truth is that you're empty.
Yeah.
And her solution is acceptance. You have to accept the reality that you have been given, that you are not in a productive creative period, and you free yourself to begin filling up again.
Her way of tackling this is to first let go of that guilt and that fear and all that and just push it aside, not worry about it. Assume that when it comes, it will come. And then the other thing she says is she has the whole idea of like, live as if I'm dying.
That sounds really morbid, but is that memento mori? Is that what that's called?
I'm not sure.
Carpe diem.
Carpe diem. I think it's
seize the day. Yeah, she says that the solution is to just leave the page and then go and live a day as if it's your last day. Mm-hmm. What would you do if it was your last day, Kim?
I'd spend it with my family.
That's what she would do?
I'd go on a hike with them.
So that's what you got to do. Go on a hike, and that's supposed to fill you up again.
There's a caveat here. She says you should also write your 300 words for the day first. This isn't just a cold turkey, I'm going to stop writing for the next 2 weeks and suddenly I'll magically start writing again. No, it's like you write the basic amount you can do. 300 words isn't too hard. You just write it down, and then you're free for the rest of the day, and you get rid of the guilt, go on and do all the stuff that you want to do. And if you keep doing that, after about a week or so, you'll sit down to write those 300 words, and you'll write a lot more than 300 words. And then you'll be back into it.
Yeah. Bradbury was into routine, too. Like, very much into show up every day, sit there, write crap. It doesn't matter what you write, as long as you get your words in.
Lamott's take on it is that your subconscious is working, but you need to have a format or something where you are exercising that bit of your subconscious so you don't lose it completely. But if you're writing 300 words a day, and then one day you write 1,000, then that's a big right there.
I had a question for you, though, Kim.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, she says that what you are doing may just be practice, but this is how you're going to get better. And there is no point in practicing if you don't finish. Do you believe that? You actually finished a draft, or you have manuscript.
I finished a manuscript.
You finished a manuscript.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard Neil Gaiman say something similar about you learn more by finishing than by starting. So what do you think?
Well, first, I think you learn a lot by starting. But the thing is that everyone gets practice doing that because everyone does that. It's like you improve your health by running a half mile in the morning. That's great. But if you actually want the marathon, you're going to keep pushing it until you run the whole thing.
Right.
So if you want to have a book, you have to finish it. And that's part of what's driving us, right? You got a story in your head that has an end. And so you need to write the end of the book.
So you've had a few false starts, like me, where you start the book or you maybe get halfway and you don't finish. But this one, you actually finished it. What did you learn that you hadn't learned before?
I think it was just putting into play. It's just the act where you have all these loose strands in a book and you bring it together to a climax, and then you had the epilogue bit. You can't write your climax and your epilogue if you don't have everything going into it. A good climax pulls in so many different elements to such a high point that unless you know what's happened beforehand, you really can't make that climax work.
Right.
So I think what Neil Gaiman was saying is that writing the end of a book is its own thing. Just like people learn how to write the beginning of the books, you need to learn how to write the end of the book, and you can't do that until you have a book to end.
Right.
The other benefit of writing a whole manuscript is at that point when you go to parties and people say, "What do you do?" I can say, "I am an unpublished novelist." When I did the other books, I didn't finish them, I couldn't say that.
It's true. I can't say I'm an unpublished memoirist.
No,
because
not yet.
I have yet to finish the damn thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's that bit of satisfaction.
That's true.
Any particular quotes you liked from this?
Oh, yeah. So, again, I thought this was a pretty good chapter, and there were some really good lines in it. And I was going to ask Kim if she had, what was one of her favorite quotes, and I would pull out one of my favorite quotes. And I've already read a few. I don't know. Anyway, Kim, do you have any favorite quote in here or quotes?
I loved the line about the truth is that you're empty. I underlined that one.
Yeah.
The other one I liked is knowing the source of all our stuff deprives it of its magic. And that was going in the idea that as an author, you know how the whole thing works, and you know what you're actually doing when you're saying the sentence or manipulating the person here. And so it's hard to see what someone from the outside is seeing because you know all the tricks you're pulling.
Yeah. I really like this part. At least it spoke to me. It helps to resign as the controller of your fate. All that energy we expend to keep things running right is not what's keeping things running right. We're bugs struggling in the river, brightly visible to the trout below. With that fact in mind, people like me make up all the rules to give us the illusion that we are in charge. It's funny because it's like, I know this kind of psychoses very well. The thoughts in my head of this controlling, I must control everything. And then you're like constantly ruminating in your head to try to control situations. So it's advice to self, really, because I do unfortunately worry. Mm-hmm. And it's a form of control. So is hoarding, but I luckily don't have that problem.
That's good.
I don't know. Did that speak to you at all, Kim?
I think that my best writing is when I'm not worried about trying to make it all work out perfectly. That's how I get my drafts out. And then I go back and fix it. So yeah, if I'm in a position where I feel like I have to write everything all at once and it has to be correct, I never get anything written. So small bites.
Small bites. One thing she mentioned that I thought was interesting, and I don't know if I would agree. She says, everything you need is in your head and memories. There in your unconscious, where the real creation goes on, is the little kid or the Dr. Seuss creature in the cellar arranging and stitching things together. So this is very similar to what Bradbury was saying about the subconscious. You feed it. You feed the muse, the subconscious takes it in, and it comes back out. But I don't think we have everything we need. Because we're reading craft books to get better. If we didn't need instruction, we wouldn't get better.
Well, there's two things. She's talking about the stuff that you actually put into the story itself. So all that stuff, all the experiences and the ideas that you have because you are a human, you're living your life, and your story is going to draw upon those elements, not upon something external that you're going and writing from. But I think also, like Bradbury says you have to feed the muse. So you have to be constantly pulling stuff in. And maybe if you're working on a particular story that involves a certain aspect of climate change, it makes sense for you to read a whole bunch of stuff about climate change and just kind of bring it all in. I think a better way of thinking about it is that it has to be something that you've already processed inside of you and that you bring it out. In that case, these craft books also are something we're processing here, and then we're using it.
I see. So it's everything you need is in your head. It's the stuff you've processed.
Yeah.
I see.
And you can add more stuff. It's just you shouldn't be working only externally.
Right.
Which I don't even know how I do in the first place.
What?
Just work externally, like not ingest and kind of process it and write it out.
So student writers, a lot of student writers, they don't understand, and it's okay, that reading, what the point of reading. And a lot of people will avoid reading. I've seen this comment from students saying things like, I have never finished an entire novel, which is sad, but I've never finished an entire novel, so everything I wrote is original. I'm like, no, it just got pulled from movies and other things in your life. You didn't do yourself a favor by not reading any novels. You know, you don't create in a vacuum.
Or I suppose the other way of it is that maybe what she's saying is like, the paper is due tomorrow. I'm going to pull up a bunch of resources and do word searches on exactly what I need to write about and find the paragraph and then just regurgitate that paragraph into my essay. Like when you don't have time to actually read the entire piece and process it, but you just know that there's a set of bullet points here that you need to use. It's not the way I would write a thing, but I can see how a beginner writer, when faced with a deadline, would just try to like find the relative points and just kind of move it from the source, change the wording, put it in their essay.
Yes, I think so. It never occurred to me that might be what they're doing. Oh, God. Okay. That explains a lot. Ah, shit. Well, then. Well, that was before. That's better than ChatGPT. Writing your paper.
The things we learned.
The things we learn. Oh, God. It's kind of like when you realize your kid did a thing, but like 10 years later.
Yeah.
You're like, oh. You can't punish them now. They're in their 20s.
And now we're on to part 4.
Part 4.
Publications and other reasons to write. That's a great title. Like, you know.
Yeah.
Get published or maybe write for this other reason.
Yeah. There's like 3 chapters and one last chapter.
Yeah. So the first chapter in this section is not write for publication. It's write for something else, and it's called Writing a Present. This is largely just a collection of some anecdotes of things that she's written for other people, or kind of like background to some of the books that she's written. I found it to be a little bit too personal to actually be useful. What about you?
It reads a lot like the letter. Mm-hmm. It almost feels like, obviously I'm making this up, but it almost feels like they were once one and the same, and then they turned them into 2 different topics.
Maybe, yeah. I think, like you said, the thing about a letter was you're saying that it was written to be to a specific person. And here, she's writing it as a present for somebody, but she's almost like packaging it up, because a letter is just a letter. But here she's actually taking experiences and stuff that she thought about and what she saw and putting it together in a solid piece for somebody else to read. And also to give out to the world and have other people read it and had that experience. She was talking about how was a single mother with a kid, and none of the books out there about parenting really spoke to her in the same way of what she needed as a single mother with a kid. And so part of the reason why she wrote this complicated book she describes is to record those experiences, because she knew other people out there would want to read about that.
Yeah. Her other example was she wrote a book about her dad dying, and she finished it before he died, and it was written as a present. And it was partly because the cancer books, there was one book on cancer that was funny back then. Yeah. And she couldn't find any more, and she really, really needed some humor. Mm-hmm. And so she, had to write her own book.
Yeah. The part of the chapter I liked, and that kind of sparked an idea in my head, was she was talking about, okay, so way, way back at the beginning of this book, she is describing a frightful first novel idea that she had that was going absolutely nowhere. And so we're going back to that Arnold story. And she says that when she was also sending it to her agent, who didn't like it but kept saying nicest things, she also sent it to I also sent it off to an important magazine editor. He sent it back with the following note. You have made the mistake of thinking that everything that has happened to you is interesting. So what this got me started thinking about was memoirs. And one of the reasons people give for writing a memoir is that these events happened and I needed to write them for myself, which is a very valid reason to write a memoir or to do writing. But then there's also the desire to have other people read it. And your memoir isn't necessarily just about you. It's about the people around you. So people write a memoir about their mother, or people will write a memoir about a particular time they were with a group of people and the various things happened. So you're not just putting yourself on the page for everyone to read. You're putting the other people around you on the page for everyone to read. And I was just kind of interesting as a person that writes memoir and has been in a whole bunch of workshops where people talk about their memoirs. Are we making the mistake of assuming that everything that happened to you is interesting and people want to read about it?
Well, clearly, no. There are such a range of memoirs. There's educational narratives, there's coming of age, there's so many different kinds. And yeah, something interesting has to have taken place for you to want to write about it. However, there's some pretty mundane stuff out there. And it's still very good because it's not so much about what happened to you. It's about how you dealt with it. It's like a piece about you and other people are there and how you either survived or how you got through it. Or there's a whole genre of Holocaust narratives. And clearly there's going to be harrowing escapes, you know.
Because dead people don't write books.
Right. And it's going to be depressing as all hell. But you already know going in that it's going to be, how did this person survive?
Okay, but let's go down to the broader question. How does a memoirist get past the point of whether what they're writing about is interesting?
About year 2 of the draft.
Okay.
For me.
Why did you start writing your memoir?
Okay. So part of why I started writing a memoir, I had quit one of my teaching jobs. And I was like, all right, I'm quitting one of them, but I'm going to keep the other, and I'm only going to work part-time, but I'm going to finally write that book. I got this degree to teach me how to write poetry. I want to write a novel, though, and that's what I want to do. And I found a way to be able to afford just teaching at one school and writing a novel. So I did. I wrote an entire draft. It's not a manuscript, but I did write an entire draft of a novel. But one of my stipulations to myself, to give myself permission to quit one of my jobs, was I had to work 8 hours a day. So it was very much like Braid Badbury. I set a timer and I wrote 8 hours a day. And that meant that I couldn't always write the novel for 8 hours. So I started a really bad blog, which I've taken down since then. And I just wrote about my day on the blog, and my only people that read it were my friends. And then one day I still had a half hour and I started writing a poem about my dad. And it was pretty funny. I was like, oh, that's not bad. And then every day after that, I just started writing a little more. And I went, hey, you know, I've always kind of wanted to write about my experience going through education. And all my poems were about my family. So I thought, well, why don't I try writing a memoir? And oh my goodness, I opened a can of worms because it's, what is it, year 4 now? Still working on this dang beast. It's getting closer, but it's, I needed to fill up time to write. I started doing it. It started making sense. It felt better to write that than it did poetry. I still had some blocks with poetry. So I was like, you know, I'm just going to try a different genre.
You came at it very organically. You came at like just to fill the time, and you kept writing and more stuff kept coming out. And you discovered it was something that you really had an affinity for. Like Lamott often talks about telling people to like start the earliest memory and write what they have, like digging deep, probably more so than your novel or the blog posts were. You felt compelled to write. But at a certain point, you decided that it wasn't just writing some poems or some stuff to fill in the time, but this was what you wanted to work on, and this is what you wanted to publish.
Well, I remember at the time, I felt very empty. I was looking back on my life and all the things I had to do to get as far as I did, which to some people maybe doesn't seem as far, but for me that was very big. For someone who's went to a dozen public schools and dropped out at 16, and then try to be working poor and then come back at 21 and go to community college and work 2 jobs. Like, that shit ain't easy. And going through all that and having a very toxic family just made it really hard. And I felt like getting that degree was going to amass to some kind of like happy ending. And I thought teaching was the way. And I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it. And really, I went through all that struggle so that I could just have a glass ceiling to look through. What I'm trying to say is that what's the point of it all? What is the goddamn point of having a life like that? And then I realized, well, one way to give it a point, one way to make it seem like it was somehow worth it all is if I can use it. Mm-hmm. And it has to be worth something, damn it. So one way to make it worth it is to justify it through writing. And I went to school for writing, and that's what my skill set is, so that's what I was going to do. The book is really for me and to justify all that damn work I put in.
So is the book for anybody else then, to put it out in the world?
Yes, because I've always written to a reader. I very rarely wrote to self. The last time I've written just for myself was probably when I was like a teenager, in my early 20s. It was always a dream of mine to be a writer. So I really went to writing for other people very quickly.
So who are you writing for?
Well, right now, it's kind of like a love letter to my mom.
So it is a present.
It is pretty much like a present, yes.
But you still want to publish it and have other people read it.
Yes, because I don't know. It's my art, man. That's what I want to create, and I want to see how far I can get it to go, how good I can get it, how far I can get it to go, and I will be happy with wherever it goes. But I need to finish it at least to whatever standards I have for myself.
And then as a final follow-up question, do you feel like this chapter, writing as a present, spoke to that same thing that you were feeling, or did you feel like she had a different take on it?
It is a little bit of a different take because my mom did not want me to write a memoir. Actually, I have a chapter on that. I told her what I was doing and I needed information, and she started practically lying to me.
So it's a tough love you're giving her.
Kind of. It is a gift because I believe I am being fair. I know it doesn't sound like I am, but I'm being fair. I'm not vilifying her throughout the whole thing. She was a good person.
And here's the other interesting thing, which is that at this point, there's you and your brothers, and there's really nobody left. Right. And honestly, your brothers aren't going to write anything. There are families where, great-grandma so-and-so gets brought in through the family because everyone's always got a story and it keeps passed down. And everyone remembers, I can tell stories about my great-grandpa Charlie, even though I never met him because, these are stories that the family has. But none of you guys have any kids. If your mother's going to have any kind of thing beyond what her life was, it's going to be in this book.
Yep. Legacy. I mean, we had a very small family, and the only legacies we know about are just dysfunction. So this is it. There needs to be a different kind of story out there for my mom. That was good. Thank you for helping me articulate that. I had not thought about that specifically. And now I'm going to put the question onto you, Kim.
Okay.
Did you write this book for somebody? Is this for yourself? Why did you decide to write a book? Not just for yourself, but to be out in the world.
Honestly, I did it for the fame and the money. No.
You're funny, Kim.
No, I think fiction falls in a different category. When you're writing about real events, there's a different level to it than people just telling stories. So I don't think I need to justify mine in the same way that you justify yours.
Cop-out. That's a cop-out. That's all right. I'll take it.
Anyway.
Well, I hope that was interesting and fruitful.
I found it interesting, yeah.
Yeah, was it? Okay.
It was good. So, a writing exercise. I think we've decided that we are going to each write a letter about something that we're working on, and we're going to write to each other.
Right. So, the prompt itself is to tell a part of your history or part of a character's history in the form of a letter. The letter's informality might free you from the tyranny of perfection.
And like we said, I'm going to write a letter to Renee about a character in my story. She's going to write a letter to me about some character in her memoir. And we're going to limit it to about 500 words. Mm-hmm. We might not read the entire thing, but we'll talk about what the experience was and whether it unblocked us or how it all worked out.
Yep.
And we have a writing retreat next week, so we don't have any excuse for not having the time.
Yay, writing retreat. Now, here's the thing. If you have not been keeping up with me and Kim like to go on our own personal writing retreats. We get an Airbnb somewhere, and we do the writing thing. And we've done quite a few of these, and they're very fun. And we have an episode on that that's on Patreon. I believe it's free. You can go there and you can listen to where we talk about why we did a writing retreat. We also have an episode on a writing retreat, and we have that cool interview with
Charlie Jane Anders, who wrote a writing advice book.
Yeah, Never Say
You Can't Survive.
Never Say You Can't Survive. So anyway, I don't think we're recording on this one, are we?
Probably not the writing retreat.
But, it's a great tactic, and it's really fun. And go listen to our other episode, and you'll see how we do it.
So, okay, that's that for this discussion, and we'll be back in a moment with one of our letters that we wrote.
Yay!
And we're back. So, we actually did an exercise this time.
Yeah, we actually wrote a thing.
I'd forgotten that was kind of the point of the podcast in reading these books, that actually apply the exercise as opposed to just complain and talk about what we read in it.
Yeah, instead of complaining, we actually do the thing, which is very valuable. It's easier to get off the bandwagon when it's the process book.
Mm-hmm.
Because some of them don't seem important. They're like, oh, I don't need to do that.
I've heard this thing before. It's a very interesting thing to think about, but
this is similar to things I used to complain about my students. I would give them activities that don't seem necessary to them. Well, I want you to free write on the prompt, or first I want you to rewrite the prompt in your own words. Then I want you to free write. Then I want you to outline. And they start skipping steps. And I started just making them do it in class because I could not get them to stop skipping steps. And I was like, look, these strategies work, but knowing the strategy is not the same as doing the strategy.
If that were the case, everyone would have written a wonderful novel by this point.
Right. Lifehacker would be amazing. Everyone's, collected all these great ideas off Lifehacker. Do we do any of them? Yes.
Okay, so let's start off by talking about what we think you can get out of exercise like this.
Okay, so I started writing this for you, Kim, and it helped me outline why something's not working, for me anyway. It's I know on the surface the general issues, but when I was trying to write them out to you, it became very clear just how problematic everything was.
So just for the listeners, why don't you read the very first paragraph of your letter? So that kind of puts it in context.
Okay. Dear Kim, I'm currently writing a chapter about reconciling with dying parents, specifically my grandmother and my mother, then my own mother and myself. I want to compare and contrast my mom's experience with her mother's death and my experience with my mom's death. My grandmother and my mom had a rocky relationship before my grandmother became sick. I, in turn, had a rocky relationship with my own mom when she became sick. Although my mom and her mom had some sort of reconciliation, I didn't have the same experience, unfortunately. My mom and I were at a kind of standstill, neither one able to discuss the problems of the past candidly. Attempts came with victimization. Fine, I was the worst mom ever. And resignation. Whatever, I tried. Let's just move on.
So yeah, I thought that was a good opening. And so basically you were trying to work out what was going in this chapter.
Right, my intention for this chapter. I have this idea of what the chapter's kind of going to be about, what it's going to do, and I summarized it kind of in a nutshell.
So originally we're going to do 500 words each. We kind of blew through that. I think the reason why we blew through it is because trying to write a concise 500-word letter to somebody means you have to start editing in your head. And it changes the whole experience. And what this was meant to be was a free write, a directed free write.
So I just looked up the words and I wrote 1,909 words.
Mm-hmm.
So I blew past double the amount.
Yeah, and I was in that range too. Then after you have that paragraph, you go on to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 paragraphs that are roughly background story that delve into all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, I'd like to point out one thing that I had not realized, and I'm rather shocked by this, because I think if you mentioned it in conversation, I would have remembered it.
Okay.
Which is that the K in Renee K. Nelson stands for Kimberly.
Oh, yeah.
And that's my name.
Your middle name is, that is your name. Yes, Kim.
That is my name.
Kimberly, or is it Kim?
It's Kimberly.
Oh.
But I mean, Kimberly and Kim are pretty much the same thing. All these times I've written down Renee K. Nelson. I never thought Renee Kimberly Nelson.
Oh, you never thought what the K stood for? It's just part of my name.
Never even crossed my mind.
Speaking of which, so what's your middle name?
So my middle name is Marie.
Okay. Mary. Yep.
My mother's name is Mary, whatever. But yeah, all this time, didn't know that small fact.
You know what's really weird is growing up, the name Renee, it's great because it's not super weird, but you're always like the only Renee, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Kimberly, most of the people I met named Kimberly, their middle name was Renee. It was always Kimberly Renee, never Renee Kimberly. And I always kind of wondered if the parents just weren't willing to commit on Renee. I don't know why the two come together, but if I got the Renee Kimberly, not the Kimberly Renee.
Very odd. Now, if my middle name was Renee, that would have been weird, but I think we would have noticed that by that point.
Yes.
That was something I learned from this exercise. Back to the exercise itself. We got a lot of backstory here.
I know.
And you were saying that you discovered you had a problem writing this. Was part of the problem the backstory?
A lot of it was the backstory because I couldn't figure out what was needed. So this chapter has been a problem chapter for years. For years. I don't know how to write about the chaos. I mean, my whole life was chaos, but this was like super chaos.
I get that feeling from it. I looked at it and said, there's all this stuff happening all the time. You have to pull it apart, but like it's all interconnected. It's happening at the same time. That's part of what writing a memoir is. I mean, our lives are messy that way.
Yeah, but usually you take out all the messy and you just don't talk about certain things, even though it's going on in the background. You just pick and choose so that the reader's not confused.
So why can't you do it with this chapter then?
I'm not sure. It all feels so interwoven. Mm-hmm. It all feels so important.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many layers in it that it's like, well, if I take one thread out, that makes a lot of it collapse, which is fine. But I'm always like, well, what's the theme I'm going for?
I see.
What am I trying to reveal? And there's so many things that I could reveal. And that's part of my problem is I have too many choices and I have analysis paralysis.
There are 3 paragraphs at the very end. Can you read those ones?
Sure thing. I do not have the same kind of ending with my mom as she did with her mom. My mom wasn't abusive in the way her mom was, but our mother-daughter relationship still had issues. Some of this we probably inherited from her relationship with her mom. Mom and I always skirted on a shaky truth. Things were left unsaid. She monologued the victim until her death, and I wasn't able to bring myself to muddy the waters. She was very unhappy about me writing a memoir. I'm pretty certain she was afraid of how I would portray her. Anyway, as you can see, I'm drowning in backstory detail, particulars of when, where, and whom. The characters in my life and the setting feel as fluid as water and loud as fireworks. I want, I think, to focus this chapter on the point when my mom said, quote, "What are you doing to them?" unquote, which is the pivotal moment I realized my mom was not on my side. I just didn't realize it until I was an adult that she never was, and would never be. Mom died without us reconciling. We didn't have the language or ability to do this. In the end, I did get to see her when my brothers didn't. Danny wouldn't get vaccinated, and my mom didn't want to see Eric's wife. I'm not sure if this letter is supposed to include a plea for help in organizing stuff, but if you see details or a focus or a point to all of this, maybe I'm going about this chapter all wrong. You can throw me a life raft and save me from the annoying, hard to organize details of my life.
I think the last paragraph there kind of shows the other use that this letter has. And when you're writing this out, you have conscious decisions you make, and it could help clarify during the writing. But also, sometimes you leave breadcrumbs and clues that afterwards you can go back and say, oh, I was using this word all the time, or I was using this thing here. Or I made an offhand comment, but that's what I want to focus on. So in that spirit, I will say that what I noticed is that you could take the first paragraph and put it onto these last 3 paragraphs. And I kind of feel like I have the point of those very much flow together.
I realized as I was reading it, I pretty much restated everything in my first paragraph.
Yeah, but in a kind of a way, more of an essay sort of writing where you tell a certain thing and then you support it. The other thing I noticed is that you're talking about the reconciliation, this and that. And then you have, I think, to focus this chapter on the point where my mom said, "What are you doing to them?" Which is the pivotal moment I realized when my mom was not on my side. And I think looking at this, you have two different themes that aren't necessarily interlinked. Like your bit about the reconciliation your mother had with her mother versus your lack of reconciliation with your mom. That's enough to hold a chapter together right there.
But not the part about the what do you do.
But that part seems to be a bit different.
I feel like it explains my mom and her mom. They had like abuse, but this is about also kind of like we both have muddy waters.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is different than what my mom had to deal with her mom, but this is the source or the pinpoint of the muddy waters I had with my mother. So to me, it's like, oh, I'm comparing and contrasting abuses.
Yeah, but the point of it was that you wanted to talk about you're comparing with reconciliations.
Right. But what am I reconciling with my mom?
That's a good point. But it does feel like to explain what your mother's issues with her mother were, and then your issues with your mother, and then your mother's reconciliation with her mother. Like, even as I'm saying it, it gets a lot.
It is a lot. It could be that I don't need to write about this at all. It could be that the whole idea of comparing and contrasting my mom on hospice and her mom on hospice, although they both happened and they both seem like easy things to compare and contrast, maybe that is not something I even need to write about. Maybe I need to take these issues and use a different frame for them, a different anchor to keep me going.
If you had a section earlier in the book that talked about this time in San Luis Obispo and the conflicts you had with your mother at that point and the realization you had about your mother, and put that in one chapter, and then later on did the reconciliation after the fact, then you would have already established in the reader's mind this whole set of circumstances, and then you could draw upon them for the reconciliation.
I see. So would that chapter be like from the point of view of me as a kid, maybe?
Yeah. Or if you really want to focus on this moment when you kind of recognize that you couldn't count on your mom, then that's the central point of that section. And you just look at all those backstory details about that crazy time of your life there, what everybody was doing, and figure out which details support the change in your relationship with your mother, both as it was happening and also as you noticed it.
I see. So it's just maybe that pivotal moment needs its own chapter that is not involved with my grandmother and all that stuff. I mean, it's all in the background, but it could be its own thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That way, those things are in the background. They show up in the story, but you don't need to support anything on top of the fact. You can focus on your main point and support that.
Right. Well, here's another question I have for you.
Yeah.
Is this interesting at all? Are the details in it interesting? Like, would you be like, yeah, I would totally read that? Or you're like, I really don't give a crap about World War II and grandma being a nurse and all this shit.
Honestly, your writing style here is very different than what I usually hear from you, because you usually read fairly polished versions of your memoir that include a lot of similes and metaphors and interesting little sentence structures that loop back on each other. And this is very straightforward writing on your part.
Yeah, I'm an academic.
I mean, I suppose academic, but yeah, it's very straightforward. And what this really reminded me of is sometimes you'll read people that aren't trained as writers that have written their family history. And it's just one fact after the next, and it kind of blurs together. And it's interesting because, these are real people and these people are connected to their family. But it's completely boring. You're no sooner introduced to one person, their problems, than you're going on to the next thing, and little offhand comments and no exploration and no depth and nothing else to it. So what I would say is this really read like an amateur person's attempt at writing their family history.
Thanks. But I think that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like Lamott designed this because you're just telling. It's not supposed to be entertaining necessarily. It's more for you than it is for the person reading it.
Right. This actually isn't a letter to somebody else, but it is a way to get stuff out of your head And I'd never actually seen you put all that stuff out in one place either.
I would never do this. Like, I would never write like this.
Uh-huh.
This is like pure telling.
Uh-huh.
I'm showing nothing. I'm just list, detail. That's organized in paragraphs. Maybe the paragraphs have like a theme. I was just mostly asking if any of the details, like if they were unpacked, or you're like, oh, that's interesting. Or maybe, I guess, your eyes glazed over and you're like, yeah.
Honestly, the details in themselves, have potential. But the thing is, if they're not framed properly, they're boring.
Yep. This is the key to memoir. It doesn't really matter what happened to you. It's what you do with the details that matter. Which is, I'm always searching for like a frame. I'm always searching for a way in to a chapter. Like, how the heck do I talk about this and make it entertaining?
Or dramatic or engaging.
Right. This chapter started out a long time ago with me trying to just write from the point of view of an 11-year-old. There was so much fucking chaos. I couldn't even organize the chapter in a way that made it easy for anyone to read because there was a lot going on. And so then I tried to make it just about religion, Catholicism. That didn't work. Like, I've tried to come at this many, many times, but that is the issue of the memoirist, right? How are you supposed to frame these details to tell a good story? And I have yet to figure out, for this point in my life, how to unravel this chaos in a meaningful and entertaining way. This letter was very helpful. I don't know yet if I have the answer to what I want to do or where I'm going, but I did get that good nugget out of it with the pivotal moment, right? The change. That's like what would that be called in a novel? Like a plot point, or when the character suddenly like makes a realization, like they get it.
It's obviously a sequel.
No, that's how it manifests in a chapter. I'm talking about like what it would be like a plot point, or it would be like the moment of change for a character, or if it was like the hero's journey. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it would be a plot point. I mean, it's definitely a developmental stage in your relationship with your mother. It's critical, actually, because there's that point where we're going from being a kid interacting with our parents, where they're just the most wonderful thing in the world, to when we become an individual and suddenly start interacting with them, maybe not as equals, but I'm seeing this as a parent. There was a time when I would pick them up from daycare or school and their eyes would light up and I was the most fantastic thing ever. And they'd give me a rock star welcome. And it was marvelous. I was mom, this most important person in their life. And now they're moving out of that as they become teenagers and become adults. And that is a natural progression. And I think the fact that you captured that moment when it really switched, your relationship with your mother changed, even if you didn't know it. And you located that point here.
Yeah.
And if your book is going to be about your relationship with your mother, then that's a critical moment to have located.
So, Kim, you are so awesome because you are a parent and you're a good parent. Dear listener, she's an amazing parent. Her kids are fantastic. They're awesome. I don't have kids. I have cats. And so.
And with cats, you'll always be the center of their life because you provide the food.
Right. Exactly. They may not even like you that much, but, they get the food. Anyway, so it's great because you have this perspective. I'm writing about a mother-daughter relationship and I don't have kids. So it's very self-centered on my end.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's all about me, and what my mom did to me. I know it would be different if I had kids. I would be like, oh shit, I am selfish, self-centered person, not realizing all the crap she was going through, because man, kids take a lot. And I don't see it and understand it because I've never lived it. Like, I can sympathize and I can like logically try to parse it out all I want, but you don't know until you are in it. And I know for a fact I was not. And so you give me perspective.
One thing about having kids is that it allows you to re-examine your childhood. I mean, it's a role reversal. Like, you've spent your entire life thinking of yourself as a child and your parents, and suddenly you're the parent and you see what's happening to the children. I mean, obviously, have kids so you have life experiences, but it's just all the experience in your life that you can apply to things. And having somebody outside seeing your experience, saying, oh, I noticed this, is very helpful.
Yeah, it is extremely helpful for me anyway in this book. So do you think Lamott would give me an A for effort?
Well, she didn't give out grades, but I think that she would say, good job, Renee.
She would say I did it the way it was intended.
I believe this worked very much because it allowed you to write in a way that wasn't cramped. Like you didn't have any format to follow. You got through a bunch of stuff. And actually, if you look at what is in there, and you had someone else look what was in there, we see patterns. We see important elements. We see that bit of the bottom of the Polaroid developing.
Right. And it doesn't come with an investment, right? You're not investing hours and hours and hours trying to write a chapter that's not working, or days or whatever. You're writing out the details, and it's kind of illustrating what the issues are without having to like invest all of that creative emotional energy in something that may or may not be working anyway.
How long did it take you to write the letter?
I don't know, an hour and a half. I did a little bit of like, I had to look on ancestry.com, which I didn't even think about, to look up grandma. And like, all I found was enlistment papers. I didn't even find a marriage certificate, which I thought was interesting.
So yeah, I think this was a really good exercise. And I have did the exercise myself, and we'll be doing it on our Patreon bonus episode, which, if you don't remember from the beginning of the episode, we were talking about Patreon. Tell them what Patreon, Renee.
So if you go to Patreon, you will get the bonus episode, which will be me and Kim discussing her letter about her protagonist for her novel. You can also get some more bonus episodes. We do a lot of activities that these books talk about, and we workshop our own work, and you can get those on Patreon. You can get snark notes from the first 2 books we read.
Yeah, that is Words to Write By Podcast at patreon.com. And you can find links on our website.
Yes, and links for our process group.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you guys so much. Take care.
Bye.
Words to Write By is produced by Renee Nelson and Kim Smiga-Adam. Our theme music is Roll Back the Carpet by Cool Cat Music. Have a great day.
Worrying about the zombie apocalypse is actually not going to prepare you for the zombie apocalypse.